Hello, folks. Good evening. And welcome to Cranbrook Academy of Arts public lecture series. I'm Scott Klinker. I head the 3D design, the industrial design department. We have a new handle this year. And so thanks for joining us. Tonight, we're honored to welcome designer Jomo Tariku as our guest speaker. Jomo's furniture designs draw inspiration from Africa's rich cultural heritage, historical structures, traditional furniture, craft, colors, artifacts, landscapes, wildlife, and even hairstyles. His research on licensed Black furniture designers has been featured in prominent publications such as the New York Times and the BOH, Business of Home. Jomo's work has been featured in more than 40 publications, movie sets, and even the home of Vice President Kamala Harris at the Naval Observatory. His designs are part of the permanent collections in major museums such as the Met, the PMA, and LACMA. Jomo has been recognized by Wallpaper Magazine, Oprah, and Susan Grainer of Vitra Design Museum for his impactful contributions. Beyond furniture design, he applies his skills to showcase African stories through compelling data visualizations and has diversified into other creative spaces, including public art, sculptures, and wallpaper design. Jomo is represented by Wexler Gallery in the U.S. They're based in Philadelphia, and Foreign Agent Gallery in Switzerland, and he resides in Springfield, Virginia, with his wife and 2 sons. I'd like to personally thank Jomo in advance for spending time with our students in the studio today and tomorrow, and sharing as many insights about design authorship and building a design practice. So please help me welcome Jomo Tariku.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming out here. I know it's extremely cold out there. At least me being from DC, I can clearly say that. Really want to thank also Michael for the invitation to come and give a presentation today. Let's see if this, okay, we're up. I've titled my presentation An African Design Journey for multiple reasons. Obviously, I'm an immigrant who moved out here. There is a story that branches through that. I'm also a person who got the right to work in the U.S. through my own design work, through the National Interest Waiver, where I presented my thesis project that started at school at University of Kansas, and that's where my journey started. I mentioned this for a couple of reasons. One being to impose on students the importance of, I don't know if you do thesis projects here, but in the industrial design program while I was at University of Kansas, our 5th year is our thesis year, and the whole idea of bringing furniture design that's based on my African heritage started there, and that was exactly 30 years ago. And because I took that, first I was very passionate about it because I did see a lack of representation in the industry back then. Obviously, you can't research back then. I'm talking about my thesis started in 92. I completed in 93. It's not something I can Google and find out. This is something I would see through magazines and books in the art and architectural library. I would go through books. All my break time was spent there, especially on a cold day like today. And I would flip through these amazing publications from all over the world. But one consistent thing I noticed was there was someone that looked like me in any of these magazines and books. That was one reason why I did my thesis on furniture. The other one was, as an international student, I said, if I go back to Ethiopia, what can I take that I can have a career with? So that is where this whole idea of concentrating on furniture and nothing else as an industrial designer came about. I want to break down my presentation into pretty much these 5 or 6 sections. Juxtaposed is my current solo show at Wexler Gallery that opened October 10th. The good thing is I have a 1-minute video that I want you to watch that will cover a decent amount of it, so I don't spend slides and slides talking about that. Then go into my biographical timeline. Paradigm shift 1 and 2 will talk about what I just mentioned about how the industry looked back then and now, and what my role is in that space. The unexpected opportunities that have happened in my career that even in my wildest dream while I was in college, if you'd asked me, would these things happen, I would have said, nah, that's further from what I would have thought things happening. Current shows and past shows, and hopefully we can do Q&A after that. So let me quickly go to the video. Hopefully you won't have audio problem.
Throughout my 30-year design career, the question of inspiration has always been a recurring and central theme, as my design language is deeply intertwined with various African elements. So it felt only natural to assemble a solo show titled Juxtaposed, a portal to African design. This exhibition takes viewers on a journey that allows me to honor the sources of my inspiration. In many cases, these influences are presented within a window set above my work, kind of a symbolic portal elevating and connecting ancestral craftsmanship with my own furniture design, while celebrating contributions of many unknown artisans. This show at Wexler Gallery, therefore, is more than an amalgamation of furniture design on display, but is meant to be an immersive museum-style presentation that not only introduces some new works and concepts, but is simultaneously educational, visually captivating, and uplifting.
All right, that's good. And we can come back to this if you have questions later on. I thought I should talk about some of my pieces and so on. And truly what Juxtaposed is an amalgamation of all my work, my thinking the last 30 years, and just putting it together. The main difference being on, Juxtaposed, just as the title says, is where we actually went out and acquired or got loans from friends and family of all these artifacts that we needed for the show. The main reason being I needed those reference points because it's a topic of discussion whenever I talk about my work. What did you base your work on? And I'm always trying to explain to people who've never seen these objects sometimes. Or to people who have seen it, but they've seen it on, printed on a book. So there's a matter of scale and material and depth that you're not unable to get by seeing it on a publication. Anyway, I went to school at University of Kansas. I studied industrial design. Like I mentioned, my thesis was on the viability of modern African furniture design. After graduation, it took some time to get on track and open my first studio. 2000 is when I opened my first studio in Alexandria, Virginia. That's when I moved out to DC. We started this practice with a childhood friend of mine from Ethiopia. We tried our best for 8 years to get traction on the furniture side. Pretty much that business was subsidized by what we did with our graphics and web design business. The furniture was going absolutely nowhere. So it was a passion project at that time. 2008 was the time when the U.S. had an economic downturn. It did affect us to a certain point. So we decided to close the practice. One of my clients on the graphic design side used to be World Bank. So I was lucky enough to get a job quickly at the moment we closed it, maybe within less than a year. Initially, I was the publishing officer in graphic design for the data and statistics group. Then that progressed into me being a data scientist later on. I worked there exactly 10 years as a full-time employee and as a contractor, I think 2 years. And that gave me two opportunities. One was to work with a whole bunch of statisticians and economists who did most of these publications, and I get to design something like that had a global reach, designed a whole bunch of websites. But later on in my career, as publication was getting out of, publication was transitioning to websites, I also transitioned into assisting most of these economists and statisticians in creating the graphics they needed. So I had to pick up the skills that later on became handy for me to do research. I, by no means, I'm a numbers guy, but it's something I learned on the job. And one of the fascinating things I picked up was how data was important in telling stories. So that stuck at the back of my mind because we noticed how many people were coming to our recently created blogs that based a lot of these stories on data and how many people were downloading the freely available data. So that kind of clicked into my brain and stuck saying, if I ever do something from this point on about design, I should include data as part of my research. So these would be the type of things I would create for our department. And at the same time, I'm at World Bank, I would get an invitation to participate in design festivals here and there, which I'll cover when we get to the show section. But as things got serious and I was ready to leave the World Bank, the discussion of rebranding came about I was having a talk with my friend and artist Melanie Barnett, who's a ceramicist, who asked me, luckily, why do you call your company Jomo Furniture? So this was something me and Scott were just talking about. And I said, well, I design furniture. Jomo's my first name, and my last name is probably hard to say for people, so that's why. And the interesting thing was she asked me what it meant. What is Tariku? So if any of you know Arabic, Tariku is just like Tariq. It's your story, it's your history. And I told her that's what it means. She asked me what Jomo means. Jomo is a Kenyan name, is a Kikuyu word, I think. I think that's how my dad explained to me. And it means burning spear. And she said, you have two great names and you use furniture as your... So the whole thing changed. And we gave the idea to a graphic designer saying, I'd like to leave an imprint of what I'm doing in this whole design journey. And she came up with the whole fingerprint logo idea. So that's pretty much says Jomo with the concept of a fingerprint and leaving your imprint on the design journey that I'm on. So let me talk about my design language, which I kind of mentioned and why I went this way when I was doing my thesis. And I intentionally made it broad. So I didn't say, because I'm designing furniture, I'm going to look only furniture. I actually try my best not to do that because there is always a tendency to look at something and recreate it pretty much the same way by, let's say, modernizing it. So I made anything from the continent of Africa to be my inspiration. It is, and I do say this to other people, it's not because I can't design another, Danish furniture-looking thing or, any of the movements that have come from Europe or America. I just want to cover that issue I mentioned to you when I was in college. I wanted to be part of the solution of making sure the canon doesn't miss people coming from the global south, in Africa being from there. I wanted to base my work on things that could inspire me. I'm also a believer that after many years of furniture being designed, especially chairs, all the way from the pharaohs up to now, there's many types of furniture pieces, and the opportunity to create something extremely unique out of the box is extremely rare. So I needed inspirations that people have not looked into very deeply for some reason or another, and put my focus in there. So that's why I've selected to get my ideas from the continent. So the iconic chair that I've designed is the Nyala chair. And like I said, I base my work on many different things. This one obviously being based on a Nyala antelope that is found both in Ethiopia and South Africa. I think the difference is just a matter of scale, how large the antelope is. Again, it is taking simple cues and just reinterpreting it. When I get an idea, I work on it, countlessly. I just keep on working on it, just sketching the same idea again and again and again until it is refined to a point it says to me, Jomo, it's time to move and maybe do a 3D model. And one of the reasons I avoid jumping into a 3D modeling tool is I feel like once I start with 3D modeling, maybe some of you are speed modelers and this doesn't matter to you, but I feel committed. Then the opportunity to change something kind of slowly goes away. But if all I'm doing is repeatedly the same, iteration of sketches again and again and again, I'm not committed. I can always tweak, change, move it, do it again 20 times. And you'll see a few sketches later on. I am my own client in a way. There's no sketch I'll share with anybody, so I just do thumbnail sketches. The days where I do large marker renderings, because that's how it was when I went to school, it's going out the window. The last time I think I opened a marker to do some sketch was maybe 3 years ago. But anyway, so just a couple of photos on this specific chair. This one has inlays in it, and this idea came about when I was having a discussion with Wexler when I showed him the initial chair design, which I was already selling. What the gallery said was, can you make a unique series just for us? So the difference between my version that I sell on my site and theirs, other than the price difference, is the inlay we have incorporated. And the inlay idea came from the spot that you see on the Nyala antelope, right on his nose, and up here and down at the bottom. So we didn't go very far from that. Again, another inspirational item from, this is a prayer staff. Makwame is a prayer staff that is used in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The chanting can go for hours. So this is where the monks pretty much support themselves. So a support to your chin or body is being reinterpreted as a chair where that actually becomes your back support. This is one of my favorite chairs. Unlike the Nyala that has the organic shapes, this is extremely geometric. In the way I was designing it was actually after I did few sketches, I pulled out my ruler and started making, all the lines are aligned like that. And I'm glad how it came out once we made it. And pretty surprised for a very small chair, actually, how comfortable it is, and the back support actually works pretty well. But that is the makwamias, the staff part that you see when you remove it from the staff. Different angles. I'm also interested in adding tiny details when I design chairs, even at the bottom, so you can see the slight wedge that's going on down there. The legs are also, my first builder, it always tells me it looks like a simple chair to make, but this is a pain to make because it has, the legs are actually 6-sided and not 4. In the way it, the joints are made up there are not the easiest to make. So the black one that you see on the right is actually cut on a 5-axis CNC machine and simplifies that process, and the joints are perfect. But when made by hand and templates, is not the easiest piece to make, which is the one on the left. Miro chair is, just to give you a background on this chair, other than obviously it's based on an Afro hair pick. I've had this idea for a while. It's one of those sketches I made. We priced it out maybe around 2013 with one builder. And when we were told how expensive it would be to make this, I just dropped it. Until the Met approached me for their Afrofutures period room they were working on around 2019. Hopefully I've got the year right. After seeing my NIA lecture in the New York Times that was published the same week, they were making a selection process for the period room they were putting together. And if you make it to the Met, it is still there. You can go see it. But this was one example that I use towards students and to others about not being afraid to propose a different design than what a museum asks you. Prior to the Met reaching out to me, I've never dealt with a museum that has the same caliber as the Met. Actually, to a point, when I received the first email, I thought an employee just wanted to buy a chair because I read it and said, no, I don't have a gallery representation. No one is gonna, this can't be the Met. So my response back to her was, is this a personal purchase? Because I wasn't so sure. But she came back and told me, no, it's not. So then I took the step of deciding, it is worth asking if they would want a different chair. And I made sure I didn't tell my wife or my brother because they would have killed me. They were happy that I was, Met was considering my work already, let alone change it. But surprisingly, they said yes, and they commissioned this work. So the reason I say don't be afraid to ask, all they can say is no. Even if this was my very first acquisition and the very first commission work. I want to talk slightly about the process. So the comb shape that you see here is actually a joint. That's where the back part of the comb comes through this piece, through the seat. Initially with this design, you can see the sketch. That was where it was headed. But I really didn't like the legs at all. And even after I came up with the idea of having the back legs as a comb, I really didn't like the idea of just butt joining and gluing it. So I kept on exploring how we're gonna do the joint. First, then the idea of making it come through was the first idea. I said, that's pretty straightforward. How about even embedding the comb idea into the joint? And that's how we came about it. This is a pretty tight fit. It was not the easiest thing to cut. You can actually see, and this is 16 layers of veneer, 1/16 of an inch, that we put on a mold and bent. With my master craftsman, David Bonhoff. And I remember the day we did the cutout for the seat was the day he said, I don't need your help because I'll be cussing a lot, so I don't need you here. So the only day I didn't help him out is when he put his router and tried to cut it. And you can see the bite it took at the bottom right there. Because that amount of epoxy and layering of veneers with trying to cut it with a router is gonna fight you tooth and nail. But surprisingly, we were running out of time for delivery, and I was hoping the Met wouldn't say anything about this mistake here. Obviously being my first project also for a museum, but we've simply run out of time. We finished it, I think we delivered it the next day or something, and the show was the following week. But the interesting comment I got from one of the curators when I ran into him at Design Miami, it was like, oh, we made a really good one for Philadelphia Museum of Art that has none of these mistakes. And his response was, but we have the first one. I don't care about how good the second one looks like. What we care about is we commissioned the first one and we got the first one. And another happy accident about this design, we've painted the edges red, and that on this one is on purpose. This one, though, it was done to hide a mistake. And the mistake was we have tenons running. So each piece that you see out there are parts of bend that we did separately, and they all got glued together. So, and there are tenons running all the way through connecting each one, and on that curve on the handle, there was a tenon that we put that we never thought about. When we trim it, it would show. So when you are cutting it, it's like, oh no, we have the tenon with different material now showing up. So we painted it just to fix that. But what it contributed is, I know you can't tell on these photos, but maybe on my Instagram you can tell. When you look at it from the side, actually what it made was each line very distinctive on the concave part of the front, part of the comb. Especially on the black one is very noticeable. Then with Wexler, we did this one for last year's Design Miami show. Similar process. Again, there was a mistake here where we were offsetting the design of the mold. I offset it in the wrong direction, so the bend is very tight. And we actually ended up cracking one of them, but thanks to epoxy and cleverly hiding it, you wouldn't find it right now, but it's at the bottom. This is also same process, putting it on a mold, brute force, clamping it, and getting the shape. Here, we actually didn't paint the edges, so you can actually see how the veneer turned out. On the right, this was, again, a request by my gallery to say, instead of just putting the bench, can you come up with something that we can put together as part of the presentation? And this wall sculpture was done for that. It's kind of my T-shirt, like Superman here. Let me jump to the Mukacha stool. Mukacha is a fusion of the idea of a mortar and pestle and an Ife bronze head from Nigeria. Every now and then I do fusion of 2 or 3 ideas. Let's keep it at 2. I don't think I've ever done 3. But I would fuse two ideas together instead of paying attention to a singular thing. My design approach usually is to look at the silhouette of things that inspire me or something that has registered in my mind, saying, okay, I like this idea. The first thing I do is draw the silhouette, maybe capture a few details about it, and then move on. I rarely get into the carvings, and there's a lot of cultures within Africa that have a very deep carving culture, but I kind of stay out of that. Sometimes I blame my industrial design background to just look at the simplest way out. But that's my tendency. I rarely get into the tiny details of things that influence my design. So the rings are from the neck rings that you see from the bronze sculpture there and the outline of the mortar. And this is just additional photo. There's a walnut version of it without no ring patterns drawn on it. The orange one, and it might be this one, was acquired by Denver Museum of Art, as it says there, but also for Wakanda Forever. It's on one of the scenes for 2 seconds, let's say. that's as much as you get excited about having your work in a movie, that's how long they stay on the screen. And this one, and we were talking about earlier about what kind of materials I use. I use from man-made plywood materials all the way to veneers and solid wood. I'm not, as long as it's wood, the way I look at it is I have a small shop, it's a wood shop, and as long as I can cut it and do something with it, that's what I'll use. That's why I don't get into metals, plastics, which I do use acrylic, but again, I'm not doing that in my shop. So there's a narrow focus on what is accessible to me easily and what can I do in my shop and come up with that. And this was an exercise, a challenge that came from my brother, who said, you keep designing complicated stuff to make. Can you come up something that you can easily make? So the making part of this tool is easy. The finishing and the sanding and finishing part is not. So kind of defeated my initial goal, but this is, laminated pieces of 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood, just CNC'd and stacked together. As you can see at the bottom right, the seat part is actually cut from the interior part. The inspiration is the very small headrest that is from the southern part of Ethiopia, called Borati. I always name my work after the things that inspire me. So that is what is called from that area. It is height adjustable. You can pull out the pin, that tiny pin that you see, and raise it. I always try to come up with, so I could have easily just scaled up that shape and called it a stool and be done. But my design approach is never that. That's the easy way out. It's not challenging to me to do stuff like that. So I captured the silhouette. I knew the silhouette could potentially be a new stool idea that would be an answer to my brother's challenge and a product to create that I can sell myself. And you can see this is what the height adjustment kind of looks like. The reason I put books on them, even though I designed them, I designed this stool and the whole series to be stools. People started using them for putting plants, putting books on them, using them as footrest, end tables. That was the unintentional end result of what people took and repurposed them for, which I love, but it was designed to be a stool. Then the whole Ashanti series came up. So again, the traditional Ashanti stool, I've been in love with that design for a long time, but I could not come up with a great idea on how to do a reinterpretation of it. So the moment I figured out this whole height adjustment thing, I said, I can lend these two ideas to two other ideas I've had easily, because now it has this unique thing I've incorporated in it that, as far as I know, no one else is doing. So the next one was to a reinterpretation of the Ashanti stool. All three, and this is the naturally finished one. You can pretty much see how all the lamination is done right here on the angled shot. This is a doggone stool of this, applying the same principle, taking an idea that I've always liked, but didn't have the idea on how to reinterpret it. So sometimes one could easily be spun off. One idea that solves a problem could easily be spun off on things where you have never had a solution for, by simply redesigning and reapplying it to an idea that you've fallen in love with previously. So the difference between these two is the Ashanti, obviously because of the round shape, we couldn't cut the seat out of the interior part of the chair. So the least efficient design here is this one, while the doggone and the Borati, it gives us a chance to cut the seat actually out of the interior. So the first prototype I did, actually, we couldn't cut it from the inside, and I kind of looked at it and said, that's a lot of waste of material. So all I had to do was just create enough space for the CNC bit to go through it. So I just reduced it, I think, 1/4 of an inch from each side, and it took care of those problems. And whenever we do seats for the doggone and the Borati, which is a triangular one, from any space that we can find from that plywood sheet, we cut the seats for a future Ashanti. So we try to maximize material use. Bless you. Insura is a work that is based on a water jug that is used to carry water over long distance, and mostly done by young women throughout Ethiopia, probably true in some other African countries also. It is back-breaking. I don't know if any of you have tried just to fill a large container with water and try to lift it, let alone put it on your back and walk across very highland topography that Ethiopia has. So again, the inspiration to use this was partly to tell the story of what it takes for getting water into each home in Ethiopia. Even though we have a lot of rivers, this is part of the poverty the country deals with. But it is a larger topic than I can get in here because there's an issue of access to international water that goes over a boundary, which is Nile and its tributaries that Ethiopia can't use. So that's a whole bunch of other stories, so I won't get into that. But that's the inspiration behind it. That was a unique piece that we got made in Ethiopia that a friend of mine actually had to carry it on a plane like a child, so it wouldn't break all the way from Ethiopia. And we resized it so they would let him get it on the plane. For juxtaposed, when I showed you the video, you saw a lot of those artifacts. Some of them I acquired, some were, we got them from friends and family. We really wanted that show to be part of a museum presentation, so we wouldn't go through this, but since we couldn't do that, we had to go find all of the artifacts that we needed for the show. Zagwe cabinet is inspired by two architectural structures found in Ethiopia. The Aksum obelisk that you see on the right is about 2,000 years or plus. Not very well known how it was actually built or who made it. It is made out of one whole piece, so not necessarily, it's called a stele and not obelisk, actually the proper word. There are a lot of cave churches throughout Ethiopia, and this is one of them. This was a transition from the Aksum civilization to the Zagwe civilization. So it's a merger of these two northern Ethiopian architectural styles that I combined into the first cabinet that I designed after Wexler Gallery requested that I design something else other than chairs and seats. And as an independent designer, I specifically focused on chairs and stools because whenever I would go to shows, those are things that are easy to pack, carry, put in my small van, take it. If it doesn't sell, bring it and keep it. And I live in a townhouse, or our family lives in a townhouse. So it was something manageable. And even though I do love the challenge of designing chairs all the time, I never expanded into other areas because of the simple fact that I would not know where to put something as large as this. So with the opportunity to work with a gallery, then this came. This is an idea that I came up with where I didn't want any handles. So, the magnetic locks at the top, you click it like some kitchen cabinets, it just opens and you close it. It is made out of ash and walnut. Kunduk Pembe chair is a mix of two words. Kunduk, I hope I'm saying it right also. It's from Nigeria. It's a xylophone that is based on horn. I happened to be watching a video on the making of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and the music part of it, and one of the artists showed up with this instrument that just fascinated me. I was already working on incorporating horns into my next design, so I said, why not adapt the name? This specific design is a conglomeration of the multi-use of animal horns, where after you slaughter an animal, you don't throw it, but you repurpose it for different things, as you can see here. The one you see at the top right is for spices. The others are cups and utensils that you use around homes. So this design is a conglomeration of all these ideas. It is my first bronze chair with the Mido. Definitely, it took me out of my comfort level. It was a chair that I never prototyped for the first time. We went straight from 3D print and looking at it and maybe doing a mock-up on the height and the backrest. You're just using plywood and blocks in my shop. I said, okay, this is how deep it is. This is how wide it is. And it kind of feels right. That's as far as I went when it comes to mocking up. So I was a bit nervous the first day I saw it all put together, thinking, would it work? In all of my work, I want my chairs and seat to be functional, even if they look very sculptural pieces. So and again, that might be my industrial design side of how to do things. So the moment I sat on it and everything felt well, was a peace of mind, to say the least. Birth Chair Series is an experimentation that I've been working with a very good collaborator of mine, and you can see her name at the bottom. Addis Kidanambaye is an artist and sculptor from Ethiopia. We've been friends more than 24 years or something like that. Whenever it's possible, we do collaborate. This was one of her pieces that she left in my very first studio in Alexandria, Virginia. And it was something I kept on looking and saying, I definitely don't want to copy her work. And I don't want to, do something similar either, even if I don't do that. So the whole idea of reversing, if you take the traditional birthing chair and you took out the seat part or the slab, it will collapse because you have nothing to stabilize it. So what I did was flip the whole idea. So the seat now becomes static, and you can pull out the backrest as you wish. So this started this fascination starting 2008 probably, or 2007, of just doing multiple sketches again and again, saying, how far can I push it? And where the whole idea of turning the backrest into totems, so you can take it out, flip it around, you can display those as a totem pieces, and you can insert another piece in it, or where you can come up with ideas and just keep building on the backrest part, because the seat part is pretty static. So for juxtaposed, the new addition is the Maasai shield chair. It is shaped in the shape of a Maasai shield, but it is kind of based on what you see on the left. So that was done early on, and this was done just recently to finish it for the show. And as part of the display process for juxtaposed is to always elevate the things that inspired me above my work, to pay homage to what have inspired me, because if not for the inspirations, I'll definitely not have a career. If you go through this whole show, the reason we put them inside a window and above my work, that's the reasoning behind it. This was just the 3 totems in addition to the one inside the chair that were done. These were all CNC carved. This is probably the most carved work I've ever done. And like I said previously, because my focus, or it has become a habit of not going in too much into the carving traditions of Africa, but it is something I really want to experiment with. And one of the reasons actually this is a conference room at Wexler Gallery that we turned into this room. And with all the past connection with the Afrofuturist period room at the Met, I ended up calling this also the Afrofuturist room, not period room. But this is where all the experimental stuff goes in. Paintings were also done by my friend Addis Kidan that you see on the wall. The chair she made, she's also an illustrator and painter. So she did a total of 3 paintings, and that's one of them. We also experimented in putting a light box underneath the acrylic seats to see how much of the glow effect can be picked up. Not as much, but it did pick it up. So there's some interesting refractions that you can see when you walk around it. This is a chair that was inspired by, it has an interesting story. It's, even though the name says Quanta, cantilever totem chair, that chair, the very first time I saw it, a couple of people told me the wrong name, saying it is called Quanta chair, which I ended up labeling my work the same thing. Then Carnegie acquired it, but it was then when I went back to Ethiopia this past February, seller of traditional furniture told me that's not the name. You got the name wrong, but now it's too late. But this boils down to, or goes back to me insisting when I went to Ethiopia to anyone that was listening to me about the importance of cataloging and putting these research materials online. Even though I'm from that country, I myself didn't know the proper name of the same chair. But again, here you can see the whole concept of having the totem backrests that are swappable. So this chair, the seat is one, but it always, with the totem chair idea, you get 4 backrests that come with it, so you can alternate whatever backrest you want out of it. And you can see how we display them. Bottom right or left to you is how we display them at Design Miami. This is my latest chair, the Jomo chair. Another challenging chair to make. We started at CFC in Maine, is when I started playing around with this idea. And we needed, for every show that I do, I try to come up with a new chair design. And it is based on another traditional chair that you see on your left. And this is the final work. This chair actually was done 3 a.m. in the morning, and we ended up having it ready within a few hours for the show. You could still smell the oil finish during the opening of Juxtaposed. But it was a mad dash to have it ready. It's amazing how simple designs are actually difficult to make. And this ended up being one of those. This is also a new design for 2024 that was inspired by a very small stool from the southern part of Ethiopia. These stools are called Duka stools in Ethiopia. Again, name stays, just a new interpretation with bent stretchers that you see there. Structurally, they do so-so job. The one thing they will definitely do is help you not collapse. It won't collapse horizontally, but vertically there's nothing it is doing much there. I just wanted to keep the idea of having those stretchers that is coming from the traditional stool to stick around. And this one is is another version without a stretcher, same idea. This whole thing, actually, the legs and seat were both CNC at home. I made all of the parts at home. Again, this was another exercise. I have a product line. What can I make that is easy to make and sell? Because I'll talk about my business model a little bit later, but it plays a role in that one. Because always creating something that is complicated to make, what it does is it makes the chair or the seat expensive to also to sell. So this was designed to be the most accessible one relative to the plywood version that I showed you earlier. So done with the design language, the next part that I want to talk to you about is the paradigm shift that I've seen the last 3 to 4 years when it comes to representation and the challenges most Black designers have faced, including myself, and how we are going about it. The first paradigm shift, I think, came when we established the Black Artists and Designers Guild. The main push for that to start was an event that was held in 2018 in New York, What's New, What's Next. I don't know if any of you have been involved. But there was about 100 industry people that were invited to be part of many panel discussions that happened. Is it the D&D building? I better not confuse it. Where absolutely no Black designers were invited to be part of the panel discussion or to be the hosts. And as you can see, major magazines sponsor these events. So that started a push by Melanie Barnett, who's seated wearing a white T-shirt there. She calls it her manifesto, where she published a long post on Instagram, pretty much ostracizing the industry. We can't be doing this in 2018. From that, she tagged most of us that you see here. I knew of her work, but I didn't know her personally. And the tag was pretty much saying, if you needed a furniture designer, you could have invited Jomo. If you needed an interior designer, you could have invited so on, so on, so on. That discussion turned into a discussion of how about, we put together a small guild that puts pressure on the media because the media plays a huge role in what we do. And that's what we did in 2018. And we put a very, very small show in a very tiny furniture showroom that loaned us the space. And this is a photo from that event in 2018. It was a bad day, worse than today when we put this event together, but the turnout from the media was actually fantastic. We were actually surprised. About 15 different editors within the media world showed up. We had a chance to do a one-on-one dialogue where they got to meet who we are. Some of those dialogues are still continuing. Some of them have died. And we're not sure where we're headed with what's happening today in this day and age also. So cautiously optimistic, but personally, the signals I'm seeing does not make me very optimistic. It looks like we're regressing because of the data stuff that I do and do some of the research that I'm seeing. But this was an Elder Core article that was our very first photo shoot that we did after we established the Black Artists and Designers Guild. Elder Core has been one of the champions, including Architectural Digest and few others. But we have to keep putting the pressure on. We keep engaging them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's natural. But these are some of the results that we achieved out of that relationship. And paradigm shift 2, for me, is encapsulated in this quoted word from Professor Ramon Tejada from RISD, which I had the opportunity to meet on my last trip there. But this pretty much spoke to me with the challenge I had with the industry. And if you don't mind, let me quickly read it. As a designer, I have come to terms with the fact that what and who design history has been interested in canonizing up to this point does not reflect me, my cultures, my values, and many of the tenets that make me a citizen, a designer, and a teacher. I don't see myself reflected in much of the narrative of design, not in the history, the theory, the practitioners, or the outcomes. I couldn't have put it much better. With the moment I read this and where I was in my career, at the moment, this spoke to me very highly. In the way I went about, at least on my side, was, you know what, with all this data experience that I have, why don't I look at things that I have access data to? One of them was simply every design company licenses from very well-established designers, and that is all that was published on every design company's website or furniture company. And I said, I can extract all that data. So the first thing I did was scrape all that data from, I think, 150 plus companies and just crunch the number. And this data was just a presentation for a paper that I did for the African American Studies out in Princeton, and nothing else. I didn't think it would go anywhere at that point. I did pass it on to one of the editors that I run into at the event we did with the Guild. And he said, hey, I like what I'm seeing here. I would like to publish it, but if I don't get comments, I can't publish it. So reached out to a few of your famous furniture companies out here in Michigan. No one responded, so he said, sorry, I can't publish it. I said, okay, it is what it is. I didn't do it anyway, so someone could reply to it or not. We'll see if there will be interest in the future. Then the murder of George Floyd happened, then the whole interest started all over again. So the same journalist reached out, which was the one you see at the center, Fred Nicklaus from Business of Home. He published it, then this thing went everywhere at that time, and started the dialogue that actually did have some positive feedback and return out of it. And then we got response, including from Herman Miller, M2L, for the New York Times article that was written related to this, saying and promising we'll make changes to that effect. I've been featured. I've been very fortunate. I've been featured, actually. This is an old list, more than 40 magazines and publications. I've actually reached a stage I don't even count, which is great. But I'm noticing also now we're regressing back. Like I said, I'm hoping it's not a reflection of what is to come and just maybe a small temporary blimp. I love showing this email that I received from a museum, from Met. This is the exact email that I received that made me say, what is going on here? And it was, I have a good reason for showing it. It is because I really find value in whatever challenges that you have in life. If you're passionate about what you're doing, you have to be prepared. Even though I didn't think I would get any opportunity out there, I simply kept on refining my craft and my design work. I never said, hey, it might not happen. If it didn't happen, well, so be it. But the goal was, I will be prepared, and when the opportunity comes, I want to be able to walk through the door. And this ended up being the perfect example. Because just like I said, the Niala chair was published on New York Times as part of the data article I'm talking about. And they were making the same decisions the same week, curating the Afrofutures period room, and they reached out. And this was the email that I got. I was telling you earlier that my reply to Anna was, are you buying this for yourself? Because it didn't feel like this was an acquisition by a museum. What my galleries say is, you started from the top and you made our job difficult. So it was the same, me reading this saying, what? I can understand a small museum reaching out. But Met is the first museum that want to buy my work. So it was hard for me to believe. But a few times I told this story and people didn't believe me, so I said, I'll show you the email. This was the article I was telling you about. And they wanted that Niala chair. I convinced them. I can't really say I convinced them, because part of the Afrofuturist installation, when you go see it, there are 2 Afro combs as part of the display. Those were dug out during archaeological digs that were done at the Seneca village, very close to the Met Museum. That was a settlement that was removed by the city of New York, where a decently sized black population used to live out there. And the 2 artifacts they found were 2 combs. Unbeknownst to me, I'm sending this idea and I get an okay right away. It's like, wow, that was strange, that was quick. But they had their own, the curatorial team apparently had their own reason for selecting. And it's not because, I sent them a chair that, I sent them a 3D rendering, not even this, and not even this design. So that's the backstory on that one. Pretty much there's an Ethiopian proverb that is written out there. The definition or the meaning of that is, lordship will be missed if you don't ask. So I asked, and I got the answer. So pretty much it's saying ask, and things might go your way if you do ask. These are the museums that I'm working with. Take out Vitra. It should be updated. But they're coming up, and RISD has already acquired, so this is an old list. Brooklyn and MoMA are in the works. But since the Met acquisitions, all of these have come on board. Unexpected opportunities. One is, it was the same. I do receive every now and then for staging requests when it comes to my work, mostly for advertisement. And it's always, can we have it tomorrow? It's like, well, these are custom-made pieces. But I got, again, a very simple email. And I didn't carefully read the domain name of who reached out to me. My son is into Marvel movies. We're having dinner, and I just blurted out to my wife saying, oh, there's another request for a furniture piece. And it came from a domain that says MCU Studios. I typed that domain, and a blank page showed up. So I don't know who these people are. And my son picked it up saying, that's Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's like, oh my God, Marvel has reached out. And it was, again, being prepared has its value. They wanted 12 pieces of those height adjustable stools in 10 to 14 days. And I had a full-time job then. So I would run the CNC machine, log into work. When it ends, I put in the next one. Then I would glue everything at night, then do sanding on weekends. Lucky for me, they didn't want any of them finished. All they wanted was just the row pieces, which they ended up painting, and very interesting pattern. They ended up renting the Niala chair and acquiring this. So if you see this is a room at the end of the movie. You'll see this as one of the characters is doing the cleaning, stacked as part of, on one of the couches. The chair is barely visible because one of them is sitting on it, and you can only see the handle, so I only know what's happening. On the whole flooding sequence, you can see those 3 stools at the back of the film. And this was shots that the set decorator sent me, the one on this side. That's from the movie, actually. But you can see the pieces out there. They acquired different works from different African designers, so this was very satisfying to see. The next one, the same designer ended up working for Megalopolis, which is a Francis Ford Coppola movie. She ended up using the Niala chair, got the thank you thing. Haven't watched the movie yet, but again, much appreciated. Something I wouldn't have thought as a design student early in my young life. I would have never thought my work would be in a Francis Ford Coppola movie or a Marvel movie ever at all. But the best one was 2 of the chairs that are part of the Vice President's home in Washington, D.C. They do have the Niala Makwame chair. This was an event they held for artists and designers that were part of the redesign of the VP's home. Was, if you asked me back in '93 as an immigrant who didn't know where my career will go and potentially going back home to be doing furniture, if you had told me something like this would happen, I would have told you you're smoking something. So this was by far a great honor and something just out of a dream, personally. But I was able to get this project because one of our guild members ended up being the interior designer. And I don't know if you know Sheila Bridges. She's the one who did the interior. And she saw these chairs at the first guild showing that I told you was in a small furniture store. And she committed back then to saying, I'm going to use these chairs for a special project. And yes, it was a very special project. Coming up, this thing was shot 3 years ago. Netflix has been delaying it again and again. But this is a series on African designers. Season 1 has already been broadcasted, and maybe season 2. But season 3 coming up, there's something that was shot 3 years ago that doesn't have any of the new works. But what I loved about it then was I reached out to these very well-known curators to say things on my behalf instead of me talking about my work. And Darren was one of them. Michelle from National Museum of American History and Culture was one. Alyssa Childs from PMA from Philly was the other one, including one collector, Amanda Precourt, who is also the person who funded the design wing expansion at Denver Art Museum. The other one was being asked, what do you want to do with the opportunity and that you've received? So at Design Miami last year, instead of talking about my work like we're doing now, I changed the platform so we talk about the changes that I would like to see when it comes to the canon. So that was a great opportunity to be able to do that through my gallery. So we did that last year with people that I respect and have worked with, the artists and designers here. And an article that came through the PR agency that's helping me out through New York Times, where I got to profile 10 different designers with different styles and approaches to furniture. And I made sure we covered the gender gamut, we covered the design style, the age gap, and make sure, something hopefully could come out of it. And unofficially, 2 to 3 acquisitions have come out of this. So one thing I would like to encourage you, especially in the space that I'm operating, is I know we're very protective as creatives only talking about our work, but we need to be comfortable with our work enough to be talking about other people. So it's okay to promote other people's work. My fear when it comes to the industry is if the focus is only on me or on Norman or on Melanie, how about the day we go out of style and all of us go out of style? Does that mean when it comes to Black creatives trying to make a name through this whole animal that we function through, if the focus is only on 2 or 3, and those 2 or 3 are not the people to collect, then you'll say, oh, well, there's no one else, so we've moved on. So I'm always in fear of that. And one of the reasons that I keep encouraging whenever I go to museums and run into curators is to, at the same time, say there's more than Jomo. I hope you know that. Jomo is not the only Black furniture designer. We bring different design languages too. Not everything is about basing things out of Africa. It could be from anything. That's just me. So I did get these 2 opportunities, and they're unexpected. Someone reaching out to me saying, could you be part of an article for the New York Times? Again, if you ask me, 93 in school, no. My goal in 93 was, if I get one piece in museum at the age of 70, and if I live long enough to be there, that's done. That will make me happy. So this has gone way past that goal. I have received a lot of recognition, but there's nothing like getting recognized by your own community. The Guild recognized me for all the work that I've done behind the scene, advocating for other Black designers. Bikila Award is an Ethiopian award that comes, that is based out of Canada. Bikila, or Ababa Bikila, is the first marathon running, or first Olympics gold medalist from Africa. So it is named after a person that means a lot, not only to Ethiopians, but to a lot of Africans. So it's a huge honor to get recognized for my contribution towards the arts. This was a ceremony in Ethiopia. When they give you a traditional blanket, you're pretty much saying you've become an elder. I'd like to consider myself as a young man, but fact is, yes, I'm getting old. But that was a huge honor to receive this in front of young designers after I did a presentation on my work. This is just the making. Like I was saying, I think Bruce earlier, I don't consider myself as a master craftsman. I just might know my way around a shop. I have a small shop, and this is a photo of that. I love making. I love the idea of figuring out how my things will be made even by other people. The idea is not, and I wish I took out my 3D model there. The idea is not to 3D print and say, oh, here, make this. It is more than that. And as of late, I use my 3D printer to figure out how we're going to make the molds, how we're going to make the jigs, and all of that. And I take all that, those parts to my builder and say, this is the process I want us to follow. Do you approve, or you want me to go back and change? So I love being involved and knowing how things are made. It frustrates me a little bit of a trend that I'm seeing in some places as of late. The idea is, oh, if I'm going to 3D print it, I think knowing how things are made will give you respect to the craft, as well as you also learning on how to make it. because you can't pay yourself out of it unless you have wealth from heaven, because this is an expensive craft that we practice in. This is some of the builders that I use. Justin's team is out of Oregon. They use both handmade crafts that plus CNCing parts of my work, and partly is carved. Same thing with these pieces that we turn, large pieces. These are not the easiest. I found out most wood turners hate plywood because it just eats up. The sharpening dulls out quickly. This is David, my very first builder that I worked with. He's the one who likes building bent pieces, and the guy who built both the Mido chair and bench, and this is him testing the Guanta chair part, because we were worried about how much it would flex. Surprisingly, it's extremely strong and didn't flex. Talk about sketches. This is the type of sketch I do as of late. They're thumbnail sketches. They're mostly done when I'm on a plane or train. I am locked in. I have nowhere to go. It helps me quickly go do iterations. I don't, like I said earlier, I don't have to commit to anything. They're just easy. The first one, pretty much, the one on the left, shows you when I see an idea like, that's what gets plotted right away. It does not have to look like a chair or anything like that. It's just a study on pattern and capturing that. So 6 months from now, I go back and I look at it and say, oh, this was the thing I was thinking about. Again, simple sketches, nothing fancy really. And you'll keep seeing ideas like this. I'll draw similar looking ideas again and again and again until something comes out of it that makes me happy. This was just a series of patterns that I developed for the backrest. So really tiny thumbnails on different patterns. There's more than 100-something patterns that are in here. I'm going to go through here. I know I've gone long-winded on the presentation so quickly. This was an old, my very first showing in a museum. This is from back in 2007. The invitations I mentioned to you that happen every now and then, this was an invitation out in Dubai. This was an eye-opening show in a way for me because I thought nobody was interested in my work, and I got invited, and they covered part of the cost, so I said, you know what, I'll go show it. But I was not expecting anything, but it was a surprising reaction to my work that woke me up and said, maybe the time is now. You can see kind of the timeline here. That was in 2016. But we ended up pulling a lot of traffic into the booth. And mostly my work was interesting to them. So it was a very awakening experience. That was followed with a show at ICFF because we ran into a saleswoman in Dubai who was selling space at ICFF. And again, going back to not being afraid to ask, I said, look, I can't afford floor space at ICFF. I promise you what I'm bringing is something you've never seen before, so can you please allow me to get this space for free? Got one email, and I thought I didn't respond to the first one because I said, oh, that's a sales pitch, I'm not gonna. But then I got a second one, and I said, you know, at least let me be respectful and say I can't afford you. Then I open it, and the pitch was actually, you can come for free. So I go back to asking because you don't know what kind of reaction you would get, which got my work recognized by Interior Design Magazine. And the same editor actually wrote a really nice one-pager on the October issue of Interior Design Magazine. And she was extremely happy how far my career went from back in 2017 to now when they did this interview. I always try to engage or work with design festivals out of Africa. After all, I base my work from ideas that are coming from the continent. This is a book publication that had the cover was one of my work, and the person holding it right at the center was the vice president of Nigeria at that time. more invitations to different places, which gave me opportunity to visit the world, which is fantastic. This was in Milan, another amazing show. The only unfortunate part was we were not able to show the actual model we worked on. The Niala chair actually was prototype for this show. They ended up making it a video format. The other thing the Guild did was to make sure we put up our own shows. Instead of waiting to be invited, we said one way to change the industry is if we do our own shows where we get to curate and we end up inviting others to come and experience the show. Just gonna throw a few other shows that are not, that were part of the build-up to where I am right now. This was a show out in Texas. This got me invited to another show at David Shelton Gallery out in Houston. This was at Design Miami in 2022, where was my very first showing, and a very successful showing at that, because all 4 items plus 1 was acquired by different museums and collectors. This was 2023's display, and these 2 were acquired by RISD, plus the wallpaper I designed back there was acquired by RISD and is on display at the moment at RISD Museum. This was actually in Detroit. This was the one I was mentioning. I designed, it was an open call to designers to submit a shape that would be part of the Stories of Us theme. There was supposed to be 50 of these for the 50 states that represent the U.S. So the idea came from the djembe drum, and you can see the progressive synthesized shapes that came out of it. At the end, we had to create a shape that is easy to paint on, and anybody who's done paintings on a round shape can understand it is difficult. So that's why, an extreme shape that you can see all the way to the left was never done. And we simplified it so we can come up with this shape that much easier to paint on. It's all fiberglass, by the way. This is our latest curatorial work as part of the Making Home Cooper Hewitt showing. It's a triennial that's happening right now, and if you're in New York, go visit it. 5 of us that you see in the photo from the Guild, architect, interior designer, ceramicist, and another interior designer, and me, the furniture designer, curated this whole show. It is supposed to be interactive. We called our section because we were given the library part of the Carnegie. This was Carnegie's library. The whole home used to be Carnegie's, and we turned it into what we called the underground library. So there are books that you can take out. These are seats and desks that you can sit on and read. You can put your feet on if that's what you want. You want a couple of people. A couple of things are ones you can't touch, but everything is supposed to be interactive. One of the ideas behind it was our collective was also noticing the erasure of Black history in the U.S. in different states. So the goal was we asked a lot of people to donate books, and we wanted people to read those books in this library. This is out at Denver Art Museum currently. If you're out there, please check it out. This one ended at Philadelphia Museum of Art in the Meadow, which they acquired. This is the second copy, was on display with these other seats. This is currently on display at the African American History and Culture Museum in DC. These are different Black designers, a few of them that I've worked with, including Norman, who has his work right at the center. I've co-founded We Aspire and the Black Artists Designers Guild. I'm a founder of a new organization called Articulate Design Lab, which is in the works. Don't have enough time to get into that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Not sure how we're doing on time, but we're going to get kicked out, aren't we?
If you have questions, yeah. quick question? Or you want to end it?
Yeah, why don't we do a couple questions? We have a couple minutes. Any questions?
Oh, good. It means I've covered everything.
I have one question. So we often talk about design as
Hold on, Scott.
design between fine design and industrial design, and it's not really a binary. There's a lot of things in between. So fine design might be more like on the craft side of things, unique objects. Industrial design is more focused on mass production. And I was wondering about that while you were showing your work. Like, you know, I'm sure your work runs the gamut.
Yeah.
But where is most of it positioned? Is some of it more like for mass production, and some is more like bespoke, one-of-a-kind
Yes.
things? Yeah.
So it ranges, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't talk about the business model that I follow. So there are things that I design geared towards mass production, be it licensed or not. So licensing is one channel. Fine craft is one channel that usually ends up going to the galleries. Diversification, so selling T-shirts, wallpaper is, another channel that started this year, even though the interest came last year. It took that long to get focus on it. But on the furniture side, some of the pieces that I designed that I sell has to be scalable. While chairs like Mido that just eats up a week or two to make, which is the bent pieces, all the parts have to be made. Then they have all the fitting and the cutting and all that has to happen. I'm glad it is not mass produced. I want those to be my sculptural, experimental, but highly crafted item. But the Niala, yes, we can. The Niala, and especially the Makwame, now we've put it on a 5-axis machine. We can scale it up. But hopefully you'll get a chance. It is at Cooper Hewitt, and it is obviously at my show, and it's at the DC African American History Culture Museum. If you see it, you'll notice it is very highly crafted. The one at my show in Cooper Hewitt, those are the ones done on 5-axis. And if you pay attention, you can actually tell the difference between two versions. And if you're into making, you might notice, because the 5-axis one, you can really tell is cut by a machine because the angles are, to a point, they're so sharp we have to sand them down or the edges will cut your finger. But the end result for me is both will work. It's just that if I need to scale up and it is not for the gallery, can I do that? Even though we can do that to the Niala chair, at the moment, it's going to cap at 1,000 once we hit that number. The Makwame doesn't have that kind of. Midos, there's only 8 of each version that will be made.
So for the most part, you're the manufacturer of all your work, or
Except the bronze.
except for
The bronze version, the 2 bronze.
okay.
So I manage everything. Pay for it, I manage everything. I find the builders that I need. All of that is done by me, except the cabinet and the bronze chairs, the gallery found those builders because I didn't know anybody.
And so another model would be to license your design to
Yes.
another brand. Do you have any interest in that?
Yeah, I'm doing that. Currently, I'm designing a lounge chair for a North Carolina manufacturer. We've been working on one stackable chair, then it changed. So again, the business model is do licensing work, do commission work with a gallery, sell by yourself, and the gallery that I work with have to be okay with this. Or else as an independent designer who only does work through galleries, if you're successful, good luck. I mean, it's just difficult to rely 100% on the gallery channel. They know it. I'm glad my gallery is okay with this model, but I've heard decent amount of galleries don't like this model. They want through and through exclusivity. And as a creative, especially if you don't have some other income, I don't know how you can pull this off. Yeah. Yeah. It's coming.
Thank you. I was curious, it's kind of a two-part question. So with the rise in relativity of AI, I was just curious from your position, what are your thoughts on the role of AI moving forward in design? And and where it plays? And then for you specifically, have you leveraged AI in any of your design work or renderings? And just curious what your thoughts are on that.
It's a good question. It comes up a lot. And we were talking about it, I think, early this morning. When I went to Ethiopia, I was doing a portfolio review of people who brought their work to one of the TV stations. And one person did have an AI-generated designs, which they looked amazing. At least, I think he used Midjourney. I've used the Adobe ones, trying to see what kind of Neala chair would come up if I give it prompts using horns and whatever, and it was atrocious. So I said, oh, I still have a job. So the problem I have with it, one of the problems, I might have multiple, it was what I was talking about, knowing how to make, knowing your way around materials and so on. All it can do at best is spit out a design. And if your goal is to go 3D print it, and that's where we're going, it's really a sad reflection of where we're headed. Because really, genuine creativity comes from here. And that struggle we have doing all those sketches, doing the research, learning about material, how do they come together? If I pour this into that, am I creating something toxic or something new and innovative? The AI in the long term might figure it out. Right now, I'm not seeing it. Does it do interesting stuff? Yes. But if all of us didn't put up all our work and it took all of that and generated this thing, it has nothing to base its work on. So just pure computational power as a creative kind of bothers me and where we're headed with it. Do we have the power to manage our rights over our work and what it does with it is going to be a topic of discussion in the coming years. And my response to that person that I run into Ethiopia was, can you make it? Okay, you've designed it. Let's just take that as acceptable. And the answer was no. So you've done a quarter. Putting these things together ends up sometimes being 95% of your work. The sketch ends up being the easiest, or the 3D modeling ends up being the easiest. So can you make it? Now, if we're waiting for a 3D printer to print all that, but up to now, the way 3D, and I have a 3D printer, I use it, but there's no way it can create any of these pieces, even if the fanciest ones can't create what I've been sharing and probably what most of you make. So I see its value as a way to experiment, but us as true creatives, hopefully we don't lean into it too much. We can't get rid of it. It's here. We just have to accept it. Yeah.
Jomo, I have a question for you, and thank you for your time for tonight. Just hearing your presentation here tonight, one of the things that I've noticed is that you are involved in a lot of different parts in this industry, and you're involved in a lot of, it's not just building, but also meeting people, talking to people, networking, and things beyond the comprehension of what I can take. But how do you manage your day-to-day in which you manage the ups and downs being in this industry? Because I know it's not consistent.
Don't sleep. No, I'm kidding. It was built over time, so I can't say I'm not the best time. I think that's the typical artist or designer's mind. I'm not the best person when it comes to management of time. I've been fortunate enough, like I was telling you, that chair was done 3 a.m., then we displayed it at 2 p.m. That was nuts. I've done that so many times, I've gotten away with it. It scares me sometimes, I'm always having a heart at the same thing with the Mido chair from Met. I mean, we were deadline date, an hour earlier was when I was delivering it. So I'm not the best person to manage, but when it comes to networking, I do value it is extremely, who you know in this industry is what opens doors. That, I really believe, even though I don't have the evidence, that relationship was met is what suddenly calls started happening. I'm saying, I don't know these people. And like I said, I don't have an agent. So other museums started calling saying, hey, we're interested. It has to be somebody I met saying, have you seen Jomo's work? It has to be, because it didn't make any sense. These are not people in my circle. I don't have that network at all. So that first impression of doing, finishing, and actually them liking the work, I really believe started opening doors behind the scene. I don't know who's making all these calls, I'll be honest with you. Later on, I did. So I found out, for example, Mint acquired my work because somebody at Philadelphia Museum of Art said that. And that curator ended up also looking into my work for the acquisition by PMA. And while we were talking, she said, you know, so-and-so reached out to you because we found out about your work and we were not the museum at that time to buy. So I wanted someone to get your work. So I was fortunate enough to have nice people like that who said, even if we're not getting it, we want a museum that has the funds to get it. So she picked up the phone and called the other curator, then later on the same. So luck plays a huge role, so I don't want to forget that. But also what you put in it plays a huge role. I, at some point, was a heavy user on LinkedIn. I just, paid my monthly dues, whatever, I forgot which one, the $40 or something per month thing, and I just researched. I reached out to every magazine publisher and curator I could find. I would hit 10, 20, and one would respond. I would value that one. It's okay, the 19 didn't accept. But I would, when I did Miami, I reached out to all of them and said, please come to the booth. Now, I don't know if they came to our booth because they read my message to them, but a decent amount came 2022. Even the gallery was impressed how many ended up coming. So is it a push that I did, things behind the scene? I can't pinpoint, but I really believe momentum picked up. Show your work, reach out to people, accept it is okay for people to say no to you. Don't necessarily, sometimes take it personally. But 90% of the time, I don't take it personally. If you can't acquire, you can't acquire. Hopefully you have a good reason for doing that, then it is fact of life. But there is a lot of efforts that I put in behind the scene that I've done through the years, and not necessarily because I'm good at managing my time. As of late, though, I am into Google spreadsheet and just populating that thing and color coding everything that I do. Have you reached out? Yes, no, green, red. So when I open it in 2 months, I know who I haven't reached out and who has responded, and I do this with the PR team that's helping me. I build their table. I build a table for the galleries because doing things through email is just nuts. You lose track. So I've really loved that transition to a table format of organizing yourself. Seems to be better. Thank you. Thank you for having me.